Welcome. Following our last video on the grand finale, that was a video that went on to demyth or demythologize the V8 Vantage Zagato short chassis Volante. We're going to be discussing today the V8 Vantage Zagato, the car built in the 1980s. I'm very fortunate in so much as in those days I was part of Aston Martin and running the London sales, and I was instrumental in the sale of a lot of these cars. And I have with me today Kingsley Riding-Felce, who rather coincidentally joined Aston Martin in the same month of March 1976 as I did, and has also a lot of experience with these cars, having been a director of Aston Martin and director of Aston Martin Works Service during that period. So Kingsley, a little bit of history on Zagato. You're aware, this is a company, an Italian design house that made their name, I think, principally by rebodying other manufacturers' motor cars, making them lighter, making them more aerodynamic, motorsport driven, you know, as is the case with a lot of the Italian design houses of the time, whether it was Bertone or Pininfarina or Touring Milan, who did the DB4, it's an interesting history and background. In the 1980s, there was a new breed of car coming through. Aston Martin produced the V8 and the V8 Vantage, and the V8 Vantage was commonly referred to as Britain's first supercar. But it became apparent when Ferrari introduced the 288 GTO and 959 Porsche was going to come to market that Aston Martin were no longer going to have a cutting-edge supercar. And that's an important thing to remember, because it was in Geneva, I think, at the Motor Show, when our former boss, Victor Gortlieb, Peter Levarnos, made contact with Gianni and Elio Zagato, and the first ideas were put together of Aston Martin and Zagato getting back together again for the first time since the early 1960s, 59-60, when the DB4 GT Zagato was first built, to bring a car to market that offered ultra high performance. And it's an interesting story. Kingsley, I think you were involved right from the word go.
Certainly was, yes.
You were telling me a story about seeing the first sketches.
Yes, Victor Gauntlet, our chairman at the time. I was in the next office to him. I was UK sales and so on, and worked closely with him every day. And he called me in one day and laid on his sideboard in the office were the outline drawings for the car, showing the hard points of the chassis and the outline of the car for the future and everything. So he showed those to me and said, "What do you think? How about this?" And
do you remember what you said?
No, but I remember being excited about it. Yeah. It was something new and something different, and you know, we knew we've got some fun to have with it. Yeah, it was all going to be interesting.
So the interesting point about this is that actually it all came together in 12 months, didn't it?
Yes,
really?
It did. Yeah.
So the object of the exercise for Aston Martin was to be able to produce a car which could, in some way or another, compete with the new and dawning supercar, the Ferrari 288, the Porsche 959. And I think it's probably fair to say that the resources within Aston Martin at the time were pretty limited, as we kind of know, during the 70s and 80s and into the 90s.
Well, there was a lot of investment at the time taking place with engine development on fuel injection and instrumentation on the Gonda.
Yeah.
So, you know, the amount of engineers that were available for an extra you know, project had to be really thought through, and the financials had to be put in behind that. So yes, it was difficult.
So in just 12 months, Zagato, having been given a brief, engineering brief, what the likely power output was going to be, what the target weight of the vehicle was going to be, had this task, a monumental task actually when you think about it.
It was.
Of not only producing a car, but living up to the last car that had been built by Aston Martin and Zagato together, the DB4 GT Zagato, which I think it's fair to say has gone on through the passage of time to be thought of as one of the most beautiful cars ever constructed. And in fact, the collector world tells us that as these cars now change hands for several millions of pounds. So for Zagato to, on day one or within 12 months, come up with a masterpiece to equal the DB4 GT Zagato is probably certainly a big ask, and probably an ask too far. And I think, you know, having given this a lot of thought, and I think we were talking about this earlier on today, Zagato took the right approach of saying, look, what we need to do is address the fundamentals.
Yes.
Now, you might not agree with me on that one, but give us a brief on what the fundamental things were.
Well, the fundamentals have got to be to get, you can't come out with a new product and a special car that's less in speed and performance than the current car that you're making. So there had to be a 0 to 60 time. That had to get down to 5 seconds, thereabouts. You've got to get a top speed of 300k, I think we were aiming for, 187 miles an hour in that order. So it had got to beat Vantage. Well, Vantage was already, as a car, doing very well. So the only way that was going to come about was through aerodynamic design, and a lot of work went into that. Things like the flared-in headlamps, and at the beginning, the very smooth bonnet, the glass that was non-protruding and very smooth, so on. And in fact, the earlier models and everything were taken to the Reginald, R.J. Mitchell, Reginald Joseph Mitchell's Spitfire air.
The wind tunnel.
Wind tunnel at Southampton Airport, well, at Southampton University, sorry. And they actually took it down there and put it in there and did a lot of development, especially on the boot and the tail area and so on. So a lot of work was done in getting the drag right down to where it should have been, the target numbers, and of course the weight. And one of the big things with the weight, we got to get in the order of at least 400 kg out of the car, 4 or 5 full-size chaps, that is, you know, so it's a fair old ask. Yeah. The car was shortened by 11 inches. The wheelbase stayed the same, but the back of the car was shortened by 11 inches, so the rear seat and everything all went. And there was a lot of work done, sort of distribution of weight. I mean, the servos that would have at the front of the car were moved towards the back behind the seats to try and rebalance the weight of the car. So lots of work was done, you know, to get the car where it needed to be on aerodynamics and everything else. They did a wonderful job because they actually, we were within 1 mile an hour, I think, of the top speed, as you know all about. We achieved the 0 to 60 time. The coefficient of drag numbers I've got, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think it was like 0.29 and they got 0.32 or something in that order. So they did very, very well with that. But it was done through a lot of things like this, and you know, getting the design absolutely right. Well,
it is the thing, isn't it? You know, if you want to make a car faster, you make it lighter, and if you want to make it handle better, you put all the weight in the right places.
Well, I think was it Colin Chapman that said that, what was it, if one of the quotes was, and I always think this is very clever, perfection is when there's nothing else to take out.
Yes.
Yes, and get it right and then make it lighter.
Get it right.
Yeah.
So
this is what we did.
Yeah, I mean that is the big thing that you know, a lot of people don't get. They look at the car and go, ooh, but it is over 10% lighter than the car that's based on, and it is significantly slipperier through the air.
Yes, it is.
And and those two things make a massive difference to the car, not just in outright performance, but also in braking and road holding and handling and so on.
Huge difference, huge difference. And if you've driven the Vantage and you get into this, you really, really notice the difference.
Yeah.
Big difference.
So, given the Zagato had the brief and they'd started on this and probably came to the conclusion that they may not produce the same masterpiece that they did in the DB4 GT Zagato within 12 months and with the financial constraint that they had. What's interesting is that in a very short space of time, this was produced. I know engineers went backwards and forwards from Aston, and I know there were all sorts of issues with Zagato at the time, who were not in the best financial shape either. But within 12 months, this car was launched. And that was an interesting launch in itself, because you were very instrumental in where the car was first shown. Perhaps you could tell us.
Geneva.
Yeah, but where?
Well, it was a model and a picture at the time, because 12 months later, there wasn't a car as such. There was a quarter-scale model, and there were a lot of good photographs taken of the quarter-scale model. But basically, it was a concept. You know, there you are. If you're interested in it, this is the model. This is what we think the car will finally look like. It's in development, and these are the pictures. But you've got to bear in mind this was 1985. The miners' strike finished in March 85. We had Margaret Thatcher at the helm. The financial markets were all going to change because deregulation was coming in October 86. There was the Lawson boom. It could not have been better timing in terms of bringing a car to the market and having an interest, especially from a UK perspective. So, yes, we were there with the model, with all the drawings and the ideas and everything else, show everybody what we were going to do, and took a significant amount of deposits against, after all, 50 cars.
And it was another 12 months then before the first car appeared.
Well, it was 12 months until we arrived at Geneva again in 86 with the 3 cars, which we could put on the stand and show on, and then we have the physical cars and everything else. That was the year that you and I ended up on the roof, the canopy of the Beau Rivage Hotel in Geneva, putting the car on display up there for everyone to see.
But whose idea was that?
Oh, I can't remember. Must have been yours.
No, it wasn't mine.
But it was very interesting because, you know, these massive car companies were all at Geneva, you know, and there was everybody there. And guess what? Aston Martin, this little company from Newport Pagnell, absolutely stole the show by putting this car on the top of the Beau Rivage on the canopy for the world to see. So there's all the motoring press and everybody drove past. There was the car up there. So certainly everybody knew that the car was there, it was available, it was happening for Aston. And of course the result of that was the final deposits came in and the book was closed.
Well, I do remember that time quite well, actually. I remember because it was a red car, so no one could miss it, of course.
Yes. But we have the photographic evidence, Nick, of you and I there.
So, launched very much a Geneva car, actually, when you think about it. The first conversations went on there.
Well,
the
like
first
the original
model
Zagato, the DB4 GT Zagato was launched in Geneva.
And just 50 units. And I think probably when one talks about why is it just 50 units, it's probably wise to put on record here that at the time, with the way Aston Martins were constructed at Newport Pagnell, the chassis, the engines were built, everything was built there, including the bodies. The only spare, as far as I was ever told, the only spare capacity in production terms was in engines and chassis. And the bodybuilders, bear in mind the V8s and the Vantages and the Vantages all had hand-beaten aluminium bodies. It was impossible to get more cars out of that Newport Pagnell facility because they couldn't get the bodies built. So here was an opportunity, quite a commercial opportunity if you think about it, of another bodybuilder building your cars for you to get some more cars out of that Newport Pagnell facility.
Well, it's the whole principle behind Zagato. I mean, Zagato existed for many years as being the specialist arm of a lot of retail, a lot of big manufacturers that wanted to do a small run. If they wanted to do a small run of cars, Fiat, Alfa, whoever was dealing with them at the time, they could go to them and say, well, you know, we need 50 or 200 you know, whatever it is, a small limited number of cars. Well, it was the same for us, you know, that I think, as you rightly say, we were restricted by the amount of chassis and engines that we could provide. And the 50, you know, I mean, they were delete build cars in the sense that every single car was a runner before it went to Italy to have the body and the Zagato stuff all put on it. So Peter Childs, who's photographed in quite a few books looking like a Spitfire pilot with goggles and hat on and everything else, literally put a wooden seat in every car and drove it up the road to make sure engine, gearbox and everything was all behaving as it should have done as best possible before it was put onto the lorry and taken out to Zagato.
So that was just a bare chassis?
A bare chassis, yeah. So it was the chassis, all the running gear, everything, electrics a lot before the panel work and the glass and everything went into it. So it was the whole running construction,
Yeah, interesting.
The cars weren't started after that. The cars actually went to Italy like that, and then they bodied them, but we actually had them back and restarted the engines and did everything after that.
Yeah. Yes,
that's another story.
Yes, another story. I do remember the first two that came back, actually. That had to be repainted.
Well, we had a program in work service for when they came back. I mean, we actually put together, David Eales was running work service at the time. He did a great job with Ron Ward, who was one of our technicians. Ron was Mr. Zagato, literally. And he had an area, and when the cars came back, Ron brought the cars in and he worked through a long checklist of everything before the car was started and before we, you know, prepared it. Because we had the cars prior to sale. So we PDI'd the cars, we prepared them, everything for customer handover. So we had to go through the whole detail, make sure everything met those expectations.
I remember it because it was quite a few hundred hours spent on each car before they could be delivered.
Yes, there was a need to make sure that it met the customer's expectations. Yeah. This was a special car.
So we've gone through the conversations, we've gone through the model, and suddenly there's 3 cars at Geneva, and there was a lot of publicity about it, as we know, orders taken, people had high expectations. Lots of comments from people about the car, because I think it's fair to say the conventional Aston Martin buyer of the day was a bit taken aback when they saw this car for the first time, because it was very different. It was minimal. It was very much Pullman function. It was very much, this is not the armchair, loads of wood veneer and so on and so forth. This is a different kettle of fish altogether. And I remember quite a lot of comments at the time, in particular about the hump on the bonnet, which of course is there to clear the carburetors. So originally there had been thoughts about putting injection on the engine, which I understand they could never really get the power by putting injection on there.
No, in order to get the power, there was an upgrade on the carburetors from the 48s to the 50s. There were a change in the camshafts, the head work was done, the compression ratio was increased, and so on, to be able to get the car to where it needed to be.
Yeah. So the X-Pac Vantage engine had a bit of a lift.
Yes.
The car was lighter and more aerodynamic, etc.
Absolutely.
And interestingly enough, the top speed, it was, having used my calculator earlier on, 1 kilometre short of the target top speed, which is quite interesting when you think that engineers have worked out how much power you need and how much weight you need that's going to give you this result, and it achieved it within 1 kilometre per hour, which came out actually not as had originally been intended, which was at Le Mans, I think, in 1985, 86 or something, when Roy Salvadori was attempting to do the high-speed run down Mulsanne before the chicanes were in place, but had a problem with the car, which was insurmountable in the time frame they had.
Yes, they had a very narrow slot, very narrow slot to do the run. Absolute fate against them. It was a rollover valve that didn't breathe properly at the back and didn't allow the fuel to go through the system, and the engine was starved of its fuel. Another quick attempt was taken, but that didn't quite work out. But then after that, you know the story, the car then went to France.
It did, and it was, I think, a French motoring journalist and ex-race driver, was it Jose Rosinski?
Yes, it was.
Who did the monitored and the high-speed time that was recorded, which from, here it is, 299 kph. So it achieved its targets in terms of being able to compete with the likes of Porsche's 959 and 288 GTO. And interestingly, you know, if you think about what those cars were, 959 was a massive technology tour de force with lots of processors and computers and four-wheel drive and all kinds of fancy bits and pieces going on, complex but effective. And the 288 GTO, essentially use of lightweight materials, funnily enough, less powerful than this, 400 horsepower. It was an interesting first stab at entering the supercar game, which this car did. The build process in Italy was quite interesting because I went down there on more than one occasion, once with a big group visit that I know you were on the same chartered aircraft I was, and I went another time with a key client. And it was all built in a sort of corner of the factory. The factory down at Arese, just outside Milan where Zagato were, had been building the Maserati bi-turbo body in white and so on and so forth. And I think that had all come to a bit of an end.
Well, the thing is, going back to what I said earlier about they were there as an industry arm for people to be able to go and say, look, build us 200 of those, do us that. The thing that really changed for them is when the Japanese manufacturing was able to then change their manufacturing processes so they could introduce a small production run on the line. So they didn't need Zagato. And once that kind of mentality came into the industry about how to introduce small batch quantities and runs and everything else, Zagato didn't have the business, unfortunately. And it's a great shame because, as we both know, it was a lovely factory. I mean, I was very surprised when I first went there to see the production line with these cranes where you could put bodies on and just take cars through, and they could go up through arches, infrared arches, with the paint and then to assembly and everything else. Far cry from Newport Pagnell, pushing it up the line.
Yeah, a bit more of us.
I thought this is wonderful. So, but in the end, I mean, they didn't need that facility. What they actually needed is they took an area in the business,
absolutely.
in the premises, and
I remember very well seeing one character one day with one of the body panels bashing it out, and he was using a tree stump as a base for bashing this panel into shape. Well, it was quite interesting.
An Italian tree stump, yes.
Yeah, probably olive. But it was quite interesting to actually see that they used, to some degree, the same skills that you actually had at Newport Pagnell.
Gosh, yes.
You know, that way of
but they were very good. I mean, they were very clever at things like getting the door skin right, using the bi-turbo one, you know, the composite rear end on the car, getting all that made, you know, the glass at Saint-Gobain where they would, you know, manage to get all the shapes in it. I mean, they were very good at what they did, very good.
Well, you just touched on the composite at the rear. That's where a lot of the weight, take out the boot floor, take out the spare wheel well, all that
take
stuff.
out the rear seats, all of that.
Interesting. But the build quality, though, was something that was, I know, on day one, a bit suspect, because I remember the first car that was coming through for a particular client who was a Birmingham businessman. I remember when it was being cleaned prior to a date that had been set for delivery, and some of the paint was a bit of an issue, and you might not recall, it had to be repainted.
I do. The problem was that we were building some absolutely fabulous cars at Newport Pagnell. There's no doubt about it. You know, we were very, very hard on ourselves. The quality was good throughout it. You know, you looked at the leather work, you looked at the paint work, the finish. I mean, we really were flying those days. And I think that there was a need to get these cars absolutely as best as we could. Now, Victor Gauntlet put Michael Bowler, who was the engineering director, out there, and in fact, I think Michael was out there for a couple of years. He then took somebody else from the organisation, a chap called Neil Hewlett. Neil Hewlett was out there as well. You know, so we had people on the ground all the time looking at processes, looking at quality and making absolutely sure. And the devil's in the detail as well. And we were also looking at the integrity of the build. It's all very well having a car that looks lovely, but it's no good if the paint's going to bubble up in 12 months' time, or it's going to develop a rust spot somewhere or something, because aluminium's touching steel. So there were lots of reasons to make sure the integrity of the build met the requirements and that the finished car was best as it could be.
Yeah. No, and you know, it's evident if you go looking at these cars even today.
It got better and better.
It just got better, yeah.
Yeah, it really did.
As time passed, they got better. And
but
I'm
there
being
was
disingenuous about the first
never
car.
a badly built one. They were all good, but that certainly we had to work very hard in the early days to make absolutely sure they met the requirements.
So let's just take it on a bit of a stage. So prototypes have been built, they've been at Geneva, there's been a high-speed test which kind of went wrong and then it gets done again. And now we're starting to build customer cars. And this involved, in some cases, taking people down to see their car in build. Every car was individual from the point of view of colours and so on. There was a range of colours put together.
Yes, specifically colours for Zagato.
Yeah.
I was UK sales and dealing with all that at the time. I actually did all the certificates. Every customer that had put a deposit had a certificate, and he had a lovely binder. I got all of those done and everything else, and took the certificates into Victor Gauntlet, and he signed them all. So it was his signature, my signature, you know, so that each client had a lovely, you know, folder with the certificate with everything in.
Yeah.
You know. So
No, I think that was a nice thing to have done, and pretty early in those sort of days. You know, these days you can get build books done, but in those days there weren't build books, and I think it was to have something like that in those days quite nice for the owners. And interestingly enough, I was doing a little bit of analysing of this the other day. There are still some of these cars that belong to their first owners, which is interesting, because the ownership profile is in itself interesting in so much as the car didn't necessarily appeal to what you might call the quintessential Aston Martin owner. It was a different kind of buyer that bought this car, and maybe new to Aston. In fact, some of them were. And to have some people that bought the car new still own it is interesting, because what it really means is they feel a real affinity to it. To me,
there were some speculative people at that time. As I said, by the time we got to 86 and the banking world had changed by about October, when the big bang came in, you know, there was a lot of European money, a lot of money came into the UK. You know, it was the days of the white shirts and the red braces, and you know, things were really flying in the city. So I think you had two elements. Well, you had several elements, but you had the client who really wanted the car, who was probably an existing owner as well, and then you had the speculative owners, because I had in work service on many occasions a car that we thought we were working for Mr. Brown as the owner, and then I would receive a phone call from someone who'd say, you've got my Zagato in your workshop at the moment. Have I, sir? Well, that's Mr. No, he's sold it. I now own it. And these cars were exchanging, as you remember.
It's a period of time.
And there was a lot of that went on. And of course, before we get to this point of upgrading to 6.3 and all the rest of it, you know, a lot of that went on as well. So there was a fair group of owners that changed hands because they were speculative, and then your original customers.
Sign of the times. You're talking about post Big Bang, and you know, loads of money, and so people were paying a premium to acquire the latest whiz bang product, and that went on. But some, interestingly, didn't change hands and have remained in the same ownership.
Good for them.
And I call them hardcore owners. It's quite interesting. So we've got the car, it's coming out, and issues at the time, I know from my own point of view, having to deal with people constantly talking about the bulge on the bonnet, because of course the first designs didn't have that. Personally, I think it's all part of the character of the car, and it helps define the car as well. But there was a lot more about the Zagato than just more power and less weight. The suspension, if you remember, went through quite a transformation going on to the 16-inch wheel with what was then, I think it was the Goodyear Golden Eagle tyre that worked with the suspension, which was dual rate springing and different damping and so on.
Well, the car was a different weight, so the damping and the springs all had to be changed to accommodate that as well.
Yeah.
You know, it's natural. Yeah.
But so to my way of thinking, actually, it was quite a different car to drive in that respect.
Oh yes,
it was the first
very
time.
different.
You know, the biggest issue was with the V8 range of cars going throughout the 70s and 80s, and the Vantage is it had a fantastic engine, but it was just dragging a very heavy car. So to have something that was less weight was really what it was needed. And so what did you think, you know, when you had the opportunity to drive one of these for the first time?
I remember.
You must have some memorable times.
I remember the first time I drove one. I don't know whether it was I don't think it was a customer's car. I think it was either a sales or a demonstration car. Not that we actually needed a demonstration car, but we were very fortunate at Newport Pagnell because we had Milton Keynes on the doorstep. Milton Keynes was being developed then, and the road systems were all going in, which were dual carriageway with roundabouts. A lot of the roads were straight. It's built in a grid system. It wasn't particularly busy. You knew where the builder roads were because they were the muddy ones, and the houses weren't built. So we actually had one or two routes that were quite a pleasure to drive. And I do distinctly remember driving the car and thinking, God, this is different. Because I'd driven a lot of the V8 Vantages and different levels of performance and so on. But I do remember driving it and thinking, this is a very, very different car. And this is what added lightness means. You know.
Well, I can vouch for that. Having done.
And I also was fortunate enough to drive them like you were on occasions, but I did have a particularly good trip once, bringing a car back from our dealer in Edinburgh, Victor Wilson, dear Victor and Anita were our distributors and dealers up there, and I had to bring a car back, and again I think it might have been a sales car, through the border countries. I left there fairly latish one afternoon, and a lovely drive all the way back through the border country and down. I mean,
that's Jim
I
Clark
do remember it. It was wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Different times, different world, but God, it was good. And these are so lovely to drive. That 400 kg weight loss, and as you say, damper and spring settings, performance and everything else, it's just wonderful. But the thing that makes it for me are things like the carburation. You know, I love the bulge because if it means having a bulge and not having fuel injection, nothing wrong with injection. It has to be, and it's on the Volante version. But the carburation version for me is absolutely wonderful. You're opening up 8 butterflies. You can feel it. You've got that control. So many people don't know what it's like to actually drive a car with carburetors. It's not a potentiometer. It's not going through an ECU as such. You're there right on the throttle. And you've got that control and that feel and everything else. It's absolutely wonderful. Great car to drive.
No, there is an immediacy to carburetor engines.
There is an immediacy both on and off the throttle. You know, you haven't got that 0.7 of something lapse as you go through it. It's lovely. The thing about these cars, when you look at them, compared, yes, the Ferrari was wonderful at the time. You know, the 959's nice. There were 337 of those. There's 50 of these.
Well, this is the point of having this conversation. There is just the 50.
It's just 50 of them, and that's nothing.
When there's just 50, there's a very good chance that actually you've never seen one, and so there is no familiarity with it. So having one of the reasons for doing this video is to try and establish a few things about the car and put it on the map to some degree. And hopefully we'll be able to achieve that because the cars do deserve better recognition than they've had.
Totally.
And they're held back by being just 50. And the reason I'm saying that, and we'll touch on it now, there's no point in beating around the bush. You know, if you look in the marketplace today, and I have to do that, it's my job, and you look at the peer group cars, and let's face it, back in the day, in the late 80s, the magazines, Fast Lane and Performance Car, or all the supercar magazines, if there were, and even Autocar and Motor, in the day were comparing the V8 Vantage Zagato with the 288 and the 959, and quite favourably in terms of its performance and so on and so forth, probably better in comfort terms. So you have to say it was put into that basket. They're the peer group cars to the Vantage Zagato. And if you look at where those cars, the Porsche and the Ferrari, sit in the marketplace today, 288, 4 million, and I don't know, 959 up to 2 million, something like that. These cars do seem ridiculously good value for money. And the only thing, the conclusion that you can draw as to why that is the case has got to be because of the low numbers built and the lack of any kind of familiarity. So if this video helps with that, great.
I think that's the whole point. People don't understand, because I've been fortunate enough in the last few years to have driven and been involved with a lot of high performance cars and so-called supercars and so on. I've never really been so, because I come from an engineering background, and I've never been so disappointed in a lot of these cars. Yes, you can go 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds. I was out on a sort of a launch, as it were, the other day, where we sat in the car and off it went, and it was absolutely, you know, aircraft type stuff. But they are so finicky. They are so needing so much attention, so much maintenance, so much caring for. They're so complicated. The great advantage of this car is its simplicity. You do not need a laptop to start this if it's been in storage for 6 weeks. You know, it's just, they are a very simplistic car.
You're talking about modern cars, aren't you?
Well, yeah, it is. It's some of the later super modern cars. I mean, I could tell you stories forever, which are, I'm just so disappointed. Yeah, some of them are blisteringly quick, but my goodness me, talk about fragile. This isn't fragile. This is a car that you could leave for 6 months and get back in and start and drive again. And as I say, you don't need a laptop for it. It's grossly underpriced compared with some of these others. When I look at the maintenance and the parts pricing and everything else of some of these so-called exotics, you think, well, this poor girl deserves a far bigger opportunity in life.
Yeah, well,
really
we're trying.
Well, you know, I'm sorry to sort of get on my horse, but, you know, it's how I feel about it, because, and that's why I'm so pleased you asked me back today, and I'm very grateful for this, Nick. You know, I'm very honoured to be asked back again, so thank you very much. I wanted to say that when we started, but, you know, the story needs to be told, because this car is misunderstood and undervalued.
Well, it's certainly misunderstood. You know, in fact, we're looking at a particular car now which one of our clients owned for 23 years. And in that time, part of a collection of cars, but he uses all his cars at least once every 2 or 3 weeks, and it has a 20-25 mile route that he drives on to exercise them. But during his ownership of this car, he had a son who's now in his mid-20s or whatever, and his son always referred to the car as the Toyota. And actually, I thought it was quite funny. The reason he referred to it as a Toyota is because it reminded him of a Celica. And that's very much, it made its name in the 1980s. I've always thought these cars look like a little bit like the Lancia Beta Coupe of the day. Very popular front engine, front wheel drive sports car. And there was another Lancia called the Thema, it's very much of the period. Pininfarina design, funnily enough. So the design of the car, very much of its period, and misunderstood, because it's not immediately obvious when you look at this car, unless you see the wing badge. It's not immediately obvious it's an Aston. So it is what it is, but as a driving car, they're terrific, and as a visual piece, we've talked about it before. I don't think really you could expect a design house to knock out another masterpiece in a short space of time, the way they did with the GT Zagato. But you've got a very clean shape. There's nothing on the car visually which doesn't need to be there. There's no false scoops. There's no. But
going back to DB4 GT Zagato, I mean, 23 chassis numbers were allocated to that program. The cars went out, as you know, only 19 were ever built to start with. Yes, there was a bit of tidying up. Sanction 2 was built and the last 4 cars were finished off. But at the time, they had a real job to sell them.
They couldn't sell them.
No, they couldn't sell
yeah.
a DB4 GT
Yeah.
Zagato.
Yeah.
The Bertoni jet. The Bertoni jet was done by Bertoni. It went on the Geneva show stand in 1961.
Yeah.
It didn't sell.
Yeah.
They had a heck of a job to get that car away
Yeah.
to America. And they must have thought when they made that car, because when we restored it in work service, it was made out of prototype steel in a lot of places. So I think some tooling was laying in the weeds somewhere in Italy.
Probably, yeah.
And they thought they were going to do some more of it.
Yeah.
And it didn't happen.
Yeah.
And now you look at a DB4 GT Zagato and think, wow. You
Yeah.
look at the Bertoni jet,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
So here we are, 40 years later,
Yeah.
looking at this. And actually, do you know, he did a really good job.
Well,
Well
the
done,
thing
Giuseppe.
is, you know, it was a contemporary design of the time.
Yes.
And like anything that's contemporary and new, not everyone's going to like it. You're always going to have some people that like it, some people that don't. And, you know, that's just the way it is. You're never going to please everyone all of the time. It was divisive, let's face it. Everyone thought of it as being a divisive shape. But in the fullness of time, I think that's changed in people's psyche.
Oh, yes.
We get certainly a younger group of people these days who, wherever we've taken these cars and taken them to shows and so on, are the generation that come up and say, what a fantastic looking car, what a great shape, and this and that. It's quite interesting. They're not the people that are perhaps going to look at even a 4 GT Zagato and say, what a wonderful car. It doesn't interest them. But yeah, you know, divisive when it came out, contemporary, very much of the country it was styled in, Italian shape. And today, just coming together quite nicely and maturing well. But what I love personally about the car is there's no unnecessary adornment. There isn't any aspect on this car that doesn't need to be there.
No, and it's not complicated
and
as a
it's all
car.
functional is the big thing.
We built cars then that our customers really wanted. We built cars for them that they were excited about, that they were interested in. Unlike today, where I think manufacturers are forced to build cars that politicians want.
Well, they are, legislation, yeah.
Yeah, it's beyond. You
So
know.
so perhaps we should be thinking about looking at certain aspects of the car.
Certainly. Come on, here we come.
We're on.
Here
we come.
I love that bonnet hump. I think that's perfect.
It's the gun size, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
You know, I was out in one of these cars with Adrian Newey, funnily enough, down near Goodwood, about 5-6 years ago. And he got in the driving seat, and within 300 or 400 yards, he said, "Oh," he said, "I know that noise. It's a ZF gearbox, isn't it?" You know your stuff.
Goodness me, Nick, this takes me back. It's just everything I remembered. It's lovely, isn't it? God, they are good, aren't they? They really are.
I can think of worse ways of spending some time one afternoon.
It's amazing how well they actually cope with these roads at the moment as well. You know.
This road is a horror, really. It's got
Yes.
bumps and bumps everywhere.
Well, it is, isn't it?
It'll be good in a minute on the fall.
Yeah, no, it's lovely. At least the tyres have got some profile in them, so at least they can absorb some of the.
They're quite fresh.
Yeah. Wonderful stuff.
What I've always loved about these cars is the moment you get any pace up, they just settle down.
Yeah.
Extraordinary. I don't know.
Well, I think the thing is you've got to allow the car to warm up a bit. The dampers have got to start working and everything else, you know.
Immediately you would just feel
But yeah, it's all there, isn't it? The car's alive, isn't it? You know, so many of these executives that you get into are just absolutely, you know, antiseptic. You know, they're so good, you don't really realise they have to put more speed in to get to get a feeling of excitement or something out of it. This is a wonderful balance of car and induction and everything. It's just, yes, people can call me a dinosaur, but poor old Mini Cooper's trying very hard. Wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Brakes are still as good as ever.
All yours, Skipper.
Thank you. That was very, very good. Thank you.
Remember how to take that brake off?
Yes, I do, yeah.
So it's a bit easier after all those tractors you've been driving recently.
Yes. Oh, Nick. Oh, Nick. Oh,
remember, it's a long throttle travel.
thank you for today. Oh, my God. Oh, I wonder if Valerie would let me sell the house. That's beautiful. Absolutely lovely. Goodness me. Do you know, you could get in this and drive to Edinburgh tonight, couldn't you? Just, wow.
Not difficult.
No. It really is lovely, isn't it?
It rides so well. I mean, that's one of the great things with these. You just know where it is.
Well, because it's so much lighter, you're just aware of that, aren't you? Lovely instrumentation as well, isn't it?
I think the
Did a really good job with that.
really
So good. I mean, you can do a quick scan so quickly,
Yeah.
can't you?
And it's got instruments.
Yeah.
Modern
Yeah.
cars.
Oh no. Warning lights. It's too late then. Funny how it all comes back, isn't it? Oh,
Yeah.
God.
The thing is, that you'll recognise all the lines for what they are.
Yeah, yeah.
As opposed to going, what's that right? So, how does it feel to be reunited?
Absolutely wonderful. Really, really wonderful.
Bring some memories back.
Bless you. Thank you very much indeed. Yes, it does. Brings back a lot of happy memories, great times, great cars. Really are. As I said, I've driven some other stuff recently, but these are just lovely. They're so right. You know, it's...
Well, certainly watching it, it all sort of fell into place quite quickly.
Thank you.
How long since you've driven one of these?
Oh, God, I wouldn't like to think.
What, 10
You know,
years?
It must be.
Yeah.
Yeah, 10 or 12, maybe even 15 years. Yeah.
It's like swimming.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Yeah, but it's intuitive, isn't it? There's something about it. I don't know. Oh, it's lovely.
So there we have it, the V8 Vantage Zagato, perhaps one of Aston Martin's less understood, but actually greatest achievements. The production of just 50 cars in the 80s, a supercar, the first of a generation, and one that we are great fans of here. Thank you, Kingsley, very much for coming along. It's been an absolute pleasure to see you again.
Well,
after
thank
so
you
long.
very much indeed, Nick. I feel very honoured to have been invited again.
No,
Thank you.
That's our pleasure. Your insight and stories and anecdotes are always welcome. And thank you for spending time walking around the car with me and going out in it. We hope everyone's enjoyed this presentation.